Crystal Chiropractic brings you another segment of Did You Know with Dr. Larry.
Have you ever heard your doctor say something like this? The results of your tests are in, and here's what they say. Or this, based on your examined findings, this is what you have. Then the doctor may explain a little more about what the test revealed or what you have based on the exam, and so on. Now, what he or she is giving you or leading up to give you is something called a diagnosis. And essentially, that's what going to the doctor is all about. It's the reason why you pay that insurance premium, the deductible and copay year after year after year. Many of you often make life-altering decisions in order to have enough money or the right job to invest in health insurance so that your doctor can give you a diagnosis when you need it. In fact, some of you listening right now are on your way to get or hear a diagnosis. And on the flip side, your doctor spends countless years in school learning how to give the right diagnosis when you come in with a problem. So I'm going to spend a moment today talking about what a diagnosis is and how it's created because it's such a heavy investment. For starters, a diagnosis is essentially a conclusion, which is defined as a judgment or decision reached by reasoning. So a diagnosis is reached by reasoning, and here's another important piece. The foundation of the reasoning comes from something called a premise. A premise is like a foundation of a house, which helps build up the reasoning. So let's do a little grade school 1 + 1 = 2 math to keep it simple. A premise plus reasoning equals a diagnosis. Now, you, the patient, typically gets or only hears the diagnosis. But as I just defined, the reality is the whole direction of your health comes from how your doctor arrived at that diagnosis, which comes from the 2/3 you don't hear, the premise and the reasoning behind it. Now, why is this little piece of knowledge important? Well, depending on which source you cite, medical mistakes and errors account for somewhere between 200,000 and 400,000 deaths per year in the United States. That's the equivalent to 4 jumbo jets filled with people who die each and every week. And here's the kicker, it's mostly preventable. Because these errors come from mistakes in one or all of the 3 things which you just heard, either the premise, the reasoning, or the diagnosis. But I'm no doctor. How could I ever know if my doctor is making error in one of those things? Well, that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked because that's exactly how you start finding out, with a question, or 2, or 10, geared specifically at your doctor. So they open up and tell you what premise and what reasoning they use to arrive at your diagnosis. You both may discover an error in your history, exam, or tests. So by understanding what a diagnosis is can be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2 to make sure the right diagnosis is given to you.
Did You Know has been brought to you by Crystal Chiropractic.